Welcome to Into the Night. I'm Nari, your guide on today's excursion down a twisted path. Be careful not to get lost. Be it dark or light, it's easy to lose your way. Are you ready? Then let's begin. At day's end. Daylight peeked through the looming storm clouds as Anderson Whitley finished his last shift as a train conductor. 33 years had flown by. It hardly seemed possible that in a flash, a brief moment in the scheme of things, he had married, raised a family, and had a career that was mainly a good one. Not everyone could say that, and Anderson took pride in knowing he'd completed a job well done. Thoughts drifted back through the years. The scene played out before him as he remembered the nervous sweat trickling down the back of his neck as he interviewed with the railroad for his first job. Old man Zeb Haskins had arranged the interview for him. He had always taken a liking to young Anderson, partly out of respect for Anderson's father Isaiah, who died in the war, and partly because Zeb raised 5 lovely daughters, but no sons. Anderson held a special place in the life of Zeb Haskins.
Andy, I see my job at the railroad as a heritage. My father worked for them, and now I'm nearing retirement age. I have no son to pass my heirloom on to, but I have you. I'd be honored if you'd consider it.
Anderson smiled a reminiscent smile. Zeb never did call him by his full name. To him, he was always Andy.
Zeb, I'm more than happy to interview for the job, but there must be 200 people vying for that spot. You know times are tough. Don't be too disappointed if I don't get it.
The old man blinked a few times and shifted his weight side to side as he stared off into the distance before fixing his gaze back on the young man.
Andy, don't you worry about that. You could never disappoint me. Just promise me you'll do your best. And I mean, do your best as an employee, because I firmly believe this job is yours for the taking.
That nervous kid in the sweat-drenched shirt, sitting in front of Wilford Corning, the head of the railroad division in that region, wasn't convinced he'd earned the spot on the crew. His voice shook. He nearly stumbled over the basic questions asked of him. 2 days later, he received the call, however. Of course, Zeb was the first person he told.
I can't believe it. I got the job.
Zeb seemed almost too confident when he replied,
I knew you would.
Anderson had no doubt in that moment that Zeb had pulled strings and the job was his before the old man even asked him to apply. He didn't care, however. It made Zeb happy. And it was a professional windfall a boy from a dirt-poor family only dreamed of having. A career with the railroad would open so many doors for Anderson. Within 6 months of starting his job, Anderson saved enough money for a down payment on a place he'd eyed for quite some time. The house had potential, and the land provided one of the prettiest views in the country. He dreamed of one day sitting on that front porch swing, holding the hand of a beautiful girl and watching the sun go down. Anderson smiled. He always smiled when he thought of his Mary Ann. They had those sunset evenings, and after a whirlwind courtship, he brought her home as his wife. Oh, how she loved to cook. One of the first renovations Anderson made to the house was a custom kitchen for his aspiring gourmet chef. Mary Ann flipped through catalogs and scoured the aisles of home improvement stores until she found exactly what she wanted. His hefty paycheck with the railroad allowed Anderson the ability to pamper her. Any chance he had to dote on her, he did. On this last trip as a conductor, Anderson wondered what the future held for his darling wife and him. His family as a whole, really. Yes, his family. He had so many warm memories of the kids. His job kept him away from home more than he would have liked, but Anderson made every moment with his family count. He was driven to make sure they had wonderful experiences and a solid foundation to build their lives upon. The loss of his own father when he was a toddler compelled Anderson to be the best father he could possibly be. All 6 of his children assured him he had succeeded. and now he had grandchildren to help raise. Because of his position, and with tonight being his last trip down the tracks, Anderson hoped for many more days with his growing family.
Hey, Mr. Whitley, excuse me, sir, but how much longer before we get there?
A young employee interrupted his thoughts. Gates, you know as well as I do that it's another 30 minutes before we reach the station.
I know. I guess I'm just nervous.
Yes, I understand. It's all right. This is a big night.
Thank you. Sorry for bothering you, sir.
It's okay, Gates. Now go back to your position.
Tonight was an unusual night for sure. The sun had been all but lost in the gathering storm clouds. Lightning flashed ahead of the train, and the rays through the clouds cast an odd yellow hue to everything around the train as it barreled to its final destination. This was not an ordinary trip, not simply because of his upcoming retirement. Anderson tried to soak in every sight along the way. He wanted these images burned into his memory forever. He recalled the first time he'd heard the news. It wasn't broadcast on the television or radio. No, he learned of it when he'd been called into a corporate meeting in Chicago. Over the years, his personable disposition and flawless work ethic earned him friends in high places in the company. It paid off for Anderson. His connections led to him having the privilege of this night. They allowed him to have hope for tomorrow as well. Not everyone, in fact, not most, were as lucky. Guilt swept over the conductor. He tried not to think of what tomorrow would bring for those less fortunate than his family. It wasn't their fault to be on the losing end of this hand, nor was it Anderson's fault for being dealt a better one. It was fate and luck, nothing more. Anderson shook his head in silence. He wasn't sure how lucky any of them were. Not anymore. Deep in thought, he'd lost track of time. He was surprised to see the lights of the station entrance tucked into the side of the mountain. The Rockies had been one of his most scenic routes. He'd taken Mary Ann and the kids on vacations there many times. His family, and soon the other passengers on this last train, would see the mountains from a different perspective, from the inside. Anderson had been given a tour of the facility, or at least part of it. The gargantuan structure, buried deep inside the range, was too large for one man to walk in the course of a day. Then again, there were portions of the facility that regular citizens like himself would never have access to. Those were reserved for government employees and the military. As they approached the entrance, a sophisticated gate slid open, allowing the train to be swallowed by the mountain. The tracks were empty, and the station was desolate, as Anderson guided the train into the stop. Everyone else sheltered a few stories below, awaiting what tomorrow would bring. As the gate slid closed behind the train, the last vestiges of daylight fell behind the clouds as rain pelted the ground outside. Anderson watched as the passengers disembarked, waiting eagerly for Mary Ann, his children, and his grandchildren to join him. He was thankful they were with him for his final day as a conductor. The train, nicknamed the Ark by many, carried the last of mankind to be saved from the cataclysmic asteroid impact that would happen at 5:17 the next morning. Thank you for joining me for Into the Night, an anthology series written by Giammanco, narrated and produced by Nari Kwak, with music created by Sexton, theme music by Nico Rodriguez. Our links are in the show notes. Into the Night is available on your favorite podcast directory, so be sure to subscribe and follow so you never miss an episode. We would really appreciate a 5-star review, as it helps new excursionists to find and join us. Feel free to share with someone you want to bring along on our next excursion. I'd love to hear from you on Twitter at IntoTheNightPod or by email at itnanthology@gmail.com. I'll see you next time, and remember, whether in the shadows or in the daylight, all twisted paths lead you into the night. I'm glad you decided to stay for a minute. I want to share with you one of my favorite podcasts.
Some of my favorite people are in this show, so be sure to check them out. A link will be in the show notes. Storytelling comes in many forms, so take a listen and enjoy.
What would you do if I told you that the world is not what it seems?
You're telling me that potato salad is the key to other worlds? Ha! It's not even the best side dish.
And people are not who they appear to be.
I don't know that we can trust Master Douche.
Well, I know for damn sure we can't trust Charles Edward Cheese.
My name's not Mike. Where puns run rampant through the streets.
The Global Adventurers Guild Master Enterprises will not stand for this.
Well, it's gag me for short, so I'm pretty sure they take everything on their knees, don't they?
And it's hard to tell who the real monsters are.
Well, yeah, it's a mimic. But I'm Francis the Lion.
3 heroes.
You have my sword.
You have my kazoo.
Oh god, my hip.
Face off against 3 villains.
Never again will they enslave me.
We'll make damn sure of that.
I'm Francis the Lion.
We know.
To keep the world of Euphrae from ripping apart.
This damn portal won't close.
Have you tried turning it off and back on again?
And Tim and Terry from getting even more screwed.
They're totally werewolves.
Yep, they're definitely werewolves.
Holy shit, those guys are werewolves.
Welcome to A Fool's Quest. A Fool's Quest can be found on all major podcasting platforms.